We're up to our brand new 2024 interview with Steve Hackett, who was the lead guitarist of Genesis from 1971 to 1977. He joined with the album Nursery Cryme, which for progressive rockers is an incredible classic album featuring the musical box, which prog fans always point out is one of the greatest songs in the category since the beginning of the genre. But then it got better. In 1972, Foxtrot came out, and the classic five of Genesis. This is before they went pop and had all the hits. But the proggy side, featuring Peter Gabriel on lead vocals, Phil Collins on drums, Mike Rutherford on guitars and bass, Steve Hackett on guitar, and Tony Banks on keys. They gave us songs that are now known as classics. From Foxtrot, Watcher of the Skies, Get 'Em Out by Friday, and the song that was, for the most part, side two, almost 23 minutes, Supper's Ready. Now, if you poll proggers, a lot of them will always have Supper's Ready in the top 10. If you talk to Genesis fans, at least the proggy ones, Supper's Ready is always in the top 3, if not number 1. And Steve Hackett was part of that. He'll talk about that in this clip. He'll talk about Jeff Beck influencing his brand new album. It's called The Circus and the Night Whale, and it is an autobiographical album. Takes him way before Genesis as a kid, hanging around with a guy who did not have his best interest in mind. He called him an artful dodger type, to quote Dickens' Oliver Twist. But in this clip, you'll hear about Steve Hackett feeling claustrophobia in the band Genesis and why he had to leave in 77. And by the way, Steve Hackett was the first Genesis member in 75, while he was still in the band, to release a solo album, Voyage of the Acolyte, which is, again, a true classic in prog music. If you haven't heard it, listen to it. Steve Hackett, our 2024 interview, I think it's our 8th interview with him, on Rock History Book.
Hi there.
Always a pleasure, Steve.
Okay, yes, you too. Hi, John. How are you?
I'm fine. Listen, I know we've only got 30 minutes, but I'm going to cut to the chase.
Sure.
I am insanely. You know what? Your guitar playing always screws with my mind.
All right. Okay.
Look, this is amazing. I mean, listen, the old adage that, you get older, you sit in the rocker, take it easy. That's not Steve Hackett. Like, man, where did this come from? The circus and the night whale.
Yeah, well, where does any music come from? I don't know. It comes from the imagination. It comes from spirit. It comes from partnerships with the people who put this together. Joe, my wife, Roger, all the musicians, the idea of starting the album in the way that it does, the autobiographical thing starting in 1950 with radio snippets of that time, to treat it a little bit like a film. In other words, here we are. It's a sort of a dog-eared, aged black and white photograph of the sound, if you know what I mean. And just to start with that feeling of radio before the days of deregulation over here. You only had 3 radio stations at most. In America, of course, we used to dream of what was possible there, but it was so tightly controlled. The world was in recovery from the war, and I think that so much of society was in recovery from those who wanted to control it, and this is why we had the Second World War, because of the way politicians conducted themselves at the time. But I digress. The album is a look at People of the Smoke. The opening track is like the smoke is a euphemism for London. That's what people used to call London. They called it the smoke. Oh, you're going up to the smoke. That's what they used to say in northern territories. They said, "Oh, going up smoke." Yeah, he's living up there. So this is London, 1950, heavily polluted, heavily bombed, recovering, particularly the area that I grew up in. It was alongside the river, Pimlico, industry, Battersea Power Station, all of that stuff. So I wanted to evoke that time And that's why the album starts in the way that it does, with a number of things that are distinctly not rock and roll.
I heard a rooster in there.
You heard a rooster in there. Yeah, that's right. Well, that was from, there used to be this newsreel that was shown at cinemas called Pathé News. And later on it became Pathé Pictorial. I think they made the rooster in this kind of little sort of laurel wreath surrounding the rooster. It would crow, and then you'd get the weekly news, and that's what it sounded like. You know, you heard a little bit of a news broadcast about going to the polls, the idea that the British were going to elect a new government potentially. So really, it's a narrative-driven album. So if you're wondering where it comes from the story. And the story really came from myself and Joe. Joe suggested a lot of things, including the title. It was as if I was doing music for an imaginary movie. That was how the album took shape. So if you're wondering where some of those ideas came from, the sounds, and the guitar playing, of course, comes from the fact that as I started recording guitar for this, I just heard about the death of Jeff Beck, which was a huge blow to all guitarists. I think, oh, that can't be it. You know, it's the equivalent of, you know, for the ancient Greeks, Achilles has just died. You know, I mean, it's guitar heroics came in the form of Jeff. Perhaps he never really knew it himself, to the degree that he was held in such high esteem by guitarists all over the world, not just British guitarists, but a number of whom I worked with, Steve Howe, Brian May. We were all going, yes, Jeff is the boy. And then suddenly he's gone, and I thought, as I'm recording the guitar, I thought to myself, well, I wonder if he would have liked this move. Here's a move with the tremolo arm, here's some tapping, here's some noises. Would he have liked this? Am I breathing life into this thing?
So that little voice is there. That little that's great inspiration.
Yes, that's right. Yes. I think that. Of course, you know, all music, in a way, I suspect that a lot of musicians that I really like suffer from imposter syndrome. 1 minute you think you're completely crap, and then something drives you to do something pretty good. And it's always that idea that you might not be great that night, you know, and you're in front of a crowd and you've got to do something about it, whatever that is. I think it's called practice. It's a strange thing, but the album is autobiographical. It's my life from beginning of a certain time, and then a rite of passage as things changed, joining a band called Genesis that no one ever heard of, and then leaving that because it claimed too claustrophobic. There's certain tracks that relate to the claustrophobia of being in a highly successful situation, but you don't have autonomy. You can't really experiment. You need permission to write songs and record. And I thought, no, I've outgrown this. I've outgrown the need for permission. I don't need that anymore. I need autonomy. I need to be the captain of my own ship, and I'll go down with it if necessary. But that's some of what went on. There are other controlling times, other controlling influences that I had to pull away from as well. So there's quite a lot of angst in the album, and also establishing Joe and I as a couple, as distinct from everything else that was going on with me. And there was a lot of opposition. It was very difficult. You know, my previous wife was, you know, there was Kim. There was this. She ended up marrying my manager, the guy that she brought in, really to manage me. And life was very, very very, very difficult. All of that was very, very tricky. And I sometimes found myself in a minority, but I knew that I had to pull away. There was no doubt about it. We went through a tricky divorce, and but Joe was with me throughout all this, and has been such an incredible support. So this is, part of what drove the album. Lots of things that I can't talk about, that I'm not allowed to talk about because of court agreements and what have you.
When his boots hit the ground, track 3,
yes.
He's taking you down. Now, when I heard that?
Yeah. Well, it's a description of a guy who I was at school with. We knew each other when we were 9 years old. And at 9, he was already a master poker player, an arsonist, a thief, a kind of artful dodger in my life. He had a problem with his leg, and I elected to push him around in a wheelchair. So I was kind of his minder. I was kind of his nurse. He was a little bit like my first manager. My mother jokes about this. He would get me jobs. I would dep for him. He would sometimes leave me at the brink of awful situations. He taught me to smoke, to play poker, to become an arsonist. It's just all the things that they don't teach you at school. And eventually, I realized that, he wasn't really interested in my well-being at all. He seemed to be at his happiness when I screwed up and what have you. And so one or two friends died. He was talking about very, very early days. We might have been 13, 14. And I said, "Oh, do you go swimming these days?" Because we used to go swimming together and what have you. He said, "Oh, I can't do that. I'm on pills." In other words, the sort of amphetamine type stuff that was around at the time. And I remember thinking, no, I'm not really interested in that. Even at that time, I thought it's not going to be a career move to get involved with that. I wanted to stay relatively healthy. I mean, hell, I was already underage drinking and smoking. So I had to weather all of that like many of us young teenagers have to do. But then, one of our friends died before he was out of his teens on heroin. And I always thought to myself, is he the guy that provided that because he was a Mr. Fix-It, And I just think, no, he didn't really have a conscience. He had plenty of ambition. He was an entrepreneur, as you would say, over that, and so funnily enough, the lines, because I was looking for a chorus for this track, and it was Joe who suggested, when his boots hit the ground, he's taking you down. That was, and it was a very masculine lyric to come out of Joe, who's a very sweet girl, as you know. And
the guy from Taking You Down, do you know whatever happened to him? I'm curious.
I don't know. We lost touch. We went to different schools, and I don't really know what happened to him after that. I imagine he's either in prison or running a South American country somewhere with a mustache. That's what I think. Dark glasses, mustache, senor with a We wrote lyrics together with this stuff. Sometimes I wrote things on my own if they were orientated towards her. In other words, if they were love songs, and there are love songs on the album that I hope it doesn't upset the progressive community too much, because I know that they struggle with love songs. They don't struggle with war, with difficult time signatures, with guitar salvos and all the rest, and heroics as we know it. But a simple love song, whoa, got to be very careful. But I decided to go there anyway and upset the apple cart. So,
like Found and Lost, like gorgeous little ditty, little jazzy right in between there. Love that.
Oh, I'm glad you like that one. Yeah, somebody mentioned that yesterday. I thought that was a track that everyone would miss because really it's just an hors d'oeuvre for what comes in. It's practically not a track. It's barely longer than a minute, but it was about first love and the thought that it was going to last forever, and then it didn't. And then suddenly I was, a sort of lovelorn teenager and moping around for the next 3 or 4 years after that. But I realized that I had to concentrate on music was going to be my savior. That was really it.
Enter the Ring. You know what I wrote?
Yes.
I wrote Yes meets Genesis meets Crosby, Stills and Nash. I like the ending. I like the circus thing. It segues really nicely into Get Me Out. Tell me about To Enter the Ring.
Well, Enter the Ring, I wanted to capture you're quite right, a Genesis feel, 12-string guitar. And it was one of those sequences that we all used to use. And I had an idea that I could give it a Genesis flavor, but Crosby, Stills, interesting. I did all the vocal harmonies myself, first of all, but it sounded like a monochrome when you've got one person doing all the harmonies. Sometimes it can work. You can sound like a whole bunch of singers, and it can work very well. Other times, it needed to sound more sunny, I felt, and so I got Amanda to do harmonies with me on it, and it sounds like she's the dominant voice because she's an octave up, over and above my stuff. But yeah, Crosby, Stills, big fan. Big fan of all the harmony bands, as it happens. And you thought there was an aspect of Yes in there. I wasn't thinking of Yes, but I guess as soon as you get into time signatures, perhaps that's what happens. The British school tended to be more time signature orientated.
Every time I talk to you, someone asks me, I always say, "Oh, do you have any questions?" And every time I talk to you, I get more audience questions than any other artist. And God knows I've been doing this 40 years, but GTR always comes up.
Yes.
The exit of that band because
we had a hit album in America and in Canada, but we had a bankrupt company in England supporting it, so it just ran out of cash. That's as simple as it is. The album cost rather more than was intended, and it was very. I didn't want to lose my house. That was it. So much as it was an ideal situation in many ways, practicality has to take over. So there's a studio album, there's a live album, and some of the things I did for GTR that didn't get recorded, I recorded on an album called Feedback 86, which came out many, many years later and is about to be re-released, but it has Brian May and Bonnie Tyler, Chris Thompson, some of the Marillion guys on it, and that was very interesting. Marillion rhythm section, Pete Trewavas and Ian Mosley, who I saw last night, funnily enough, at Cirque du Soleil in London. So that was very interesting. That's the kind of GTR connection that I'm saying. But in a way, it was intended to be a follow-up to GTR, but I didn't quite have the high-powered management setup that GTR had at the time. So it's one of those, this is going to have to wait a while. And I went off and did an acoustic album at the time, just to keep my hand in. Really, I did an album called Momentum. More information than you need, but if you get all these questions from people, maybe that fills in some of the gaps.
Get Me Out, that's my favorite guitar solo on the whole album. It just spoke to me. I love that song.
Right. Let me. I'm just going to look up this one here because, Get Me Out. You like that one? Yeah. That's there's more There's more shredding going on there. Get Me Out. It's a kind of dance of death. It's the album, in some ways, the album at its most circusy, but there's sort of the grotesque aspect of the circus, an imagined nightmare circus. That's what that's all about. I'm very proud of the way that track sounds. It sounds like an enormous guitar at the beginning and on the riff, but it's actually it's heavily tracked, both with guitars and with keyboards. So yeah, we got some mellotron brass in there, some organ, and a very high part sounding a bit like a synth, but it's on guitar, sort of echoey type thing. Gives it a spookiness, slight sort of Zeppelinification on it, I guess, but the spookier end of bluesy stuff.
Ghost Moon and Living Love. That is gorgeous. That is so angelic. Great tune. And near the end, it sounds like your earlier Genesis work to me. Tell me about that song.
Love song. I was influenced by, there's a band called Dare, an English band, British band, I should say. And I was very taken with their work, and I was trying to channel the singer, Darren Wharton, who's got this incredible vibrato with his voice, just got a great voice. And I didn't end up sounding remotely like him, but I was trying to get this impassioned vibrato thing. And my God, do I have to go around the houses to get it? But, it's a challenge. Later on in the song, once again, I did harmonies at the end. And some of it I'd written right back in 1969. I had a little sequence that sounded, a descending sequence that sounded a little bit Beatlesque. But once again, I did the harmonies and I thought, yeah, sounds a little dull. Once again, I said, Amanda, do you think you could do harmonies on this? And she did. And it sounded a little soft. And I said, do you think you could do them more strident? So she did. And then we got it into the picture. And once again, if you think the other thing sounded a bit Crosby, Stills, then there's this kind of harmony sound that we kind of make between us. And she adds the sunshine. That's her voice. So we do harmonies together. Nad is on one of the tracks. He's on not Found and Lost, Taking You Down. That's his voice.
Yeah.
On that. We handled the rest of the vocals. And right at the beginning of that, you said it's gorgeous. The melody right at the beginning, which is Amanda singing in a kind of semi-operatic way. That was a melody that I dreamt. I was suffering from swamp fever. I'd been on the Louisiana swamps some years ago, and I swallowed swamp water, not because I went for a swim, but because there was a storm. The storm is up and that fan is going at the back.
Yeah.
So it's all drumming up a storm, and I ended up swallowing swamp water, and I got sick for about 2 weeks. And it wasn't until I hit New York that, because I was on tour at the time, I hit New York and I had this extraordinary dream, and I heard this wonderful melody with a woman's voice, and it was as if the clouds parted. The pain that I had, the alien that was in my stomach, just went. And I remembered the melody. I wrote it down straight away, and I sang it to her, and I was looking for the optimum key for her. So I think we recorded it, if I remember correctly, it might be in the key of F. Could be wrong, don't quote me. I don't have perfect pitch or perfect memory. But
Neither.
she
None of
sounded
us do.
lovely on the beginning of it. Set up the song in a very kind of classical, kind of cross between Hollywood and classical and operatic and all that kind of thing, to set up the song. So it's a kind of multi-layered love song, really.
By the way, have you heard how Phil's doing? Phil Collins?
Not for a few, no, not for a few months. I haven't heard, so I don't know at this point. I think that those who are around Phil tend to protect him and tend to stonewall and won't always spill the beans. I'll hear more if it's via a friend, or I'll hear more. I can write to him, but I don't want to bother him. I know he's got problems. But I did write to him at one point when he was going through agonies with his ex and what have you. So yeah, we had a bit of a communication there, which is nice. Peter Gabriel and I have got a joint birthday coming up soon.
That's
so we
right.
normally talk round about birthday. We're one day apart, birthday, same year. I'll see how he's doing. I know he's had success with his album and tour.
What do you think? Have you heard it?
I've heard some of it. I haven't heard the whole thing yet.
One of the best tunes, wherever you are. I mean, so the press release says you revisit some of the musical box 3 guitar parts on there.
Yeah, the 3-part guitar me stuff that I did on Musical Box, the song Musical Box from Genesis 1971 from Nursery Cryme. When I met Brian May for the first time, he said that had been an influence on him, the guitar work on that track. There were 3 guitar solos on that track, and I realized that the last one, which was a 3-part harmony, I always thought he was Mr. Harmony Guitar, but then I was playing some of that tune with one of the guitars he invented, and I ended up swapping a Les Paul for a copy of Brian's guitar, the Red Special, because it's got one specific feature. It's got the ability to be able to put all of the pickups out of phase with each other. So if you put the neck pickup of the 3 out of phase with the others, you get this high harmonic thing that is very Brian, and it's the sort of thing that guitarists are chasing a lot, the elusive upper harmonic. So in the main I used that, but then I think I also used my Les Paul and my Fernandez, because that does things that I think of it as the Brian. The Brian doesn't do all of those things, but it does the other thing. You know, it does that cry that works very, very well. So then I was doing, I did a sort of 3-part harmony guitar solo that sounded a little bit like me, and a little bit like me meets Brian, really, because, you know, having heard, you know, that I've been an influence, and here's me thinking, you know, yes, you know, we influence each other. That's how it works. And we work together on a couple of projects. Immensely sweet, nice, self-effacing guy, but with steely determination. So yes, that track, that actually is probably my favorite track, because it was recorded early on, and I wasn't thinking about fitting it into the format that we have in the end, but it worked very well because of the sort of the evolved love song aspect of, because, you know, part of my autobiographical story, it's very important that my meeting Joe and the combining of forces there, it made a huge difference.
Someone once said on one of the Genesis things, when they see you and Joe together, and I immediately related to it. When you post a picture of you and her together, they smile. And there's something that's intrinsic about people who are together and somehow work yin and yang with each other, that people don't even know why they're smiling, but they just know it's right.
Well, it's something, funnily enough, my mother said something interesting. She said, when a couple are really the genuine article, they give off something. Something happens, and I often get the feeling that there's some kind of third force at work, whether that's in the realm of spirit or whatever it is. But we kind of become each other. That's really it. There's something. I mean, we haven't had children, but we've had a hell of a lot of brain children in that time. So it's an interesting sacrifice that she made in order to be together with me. And it took a while for us to, quite a while, to establish ourselves as a couple in the face of enormous complication.
Okay, one quick one. Are you surprised?
Sure.
When you left Genesis, you had, there was a younger man who had all these ideas who wanted to express them. Now, looking back, do you think that younger man who left Genesis, that younger version of you, would have imagined all the roads? And man, you've had a lot of creative roads. You think he knew he had that many ideas in him? Looking back at that younger version?
So. No, I think I would have been extremely surprised that the work I've done, and again I have to bring in Jo. She said it's as if it's from rant to romance, from full rant to full romance. Full scream to the most delicate things. And so I wanted to attack music in a very broad way. And did I say Broadway? Give my regards.
As most of you know, we have 3 big channels for rock history. This one, where we put our entire interviews on, and Today in History, Rock History Book. Rock History Music, which is our huge channel, has 128,000 subscribers. And Rock History Canada. We specifically had a Canadian channel because we had old interviews from a lot of Canadian musicians that maybe anyone outside the country would not be aware of. All 3 do incredibly well. I say this because we want you to join our newsletter. Every single week we'll release 1 or 2 newsletters that tell you about our new videos, so you don't miss any one of them. And we'll have prizes as well. We're going to give away weekly rock books, box sets, albums, autographed albums, and CDs. So it's worth it to join our newsletter. Also in the description, you'll see a link to our Patreon account. You'll get early access to all our videos, a PayPal link where you can make a donation if you'd like, but we just love it when you subscribe to our channel. Thank you. Like our videos and comment on them as well. I'm John Bowden. This is Rock History Book. Take care.